Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Let's Talk Antigonish, the podcast where we sit down with local experts to tackle the questions we're all curious about when it comes to life in our amazing town.
We are your hosts. I'm Anuj.
And I'm Justin. And without a local newspaper, it's been difficult to find in-depth coverage of local stories that affect Antigonish.
And while this podcast won't be a comprehensive solution, we hope it will become a handy resource to hear about issues that really matter to people of Antigonish, people like you and me.
Each episode, we will try to find local experts to answer a question that people in our town have been asking. We are speaking today with Amy Hendriks and Paul Davie, the owners of a big piece of land just past Bethany, where there's that new building being constructed kind of across from Mount Cameron there on the 337. Our question for them is, what is that building that you guys are building out there? We've heard rumors, but what's the deal?
So the building that you see is actually a group home for the CACL. When we bought that large block of land, we didn't need all of it. We were talking to Jeff Teasdale, who had been looking for quite a while for a piece of land to put this group home on. And for whatever reason, nobody wanted them as neighbors, or it was zoned wrong, or it wasn't big enough, or whatever the reason was. And so, we just said, we can give you a piece.
So the CACL is building a new building. Are they moving everything over there?
This is a new group home for some individuals who are mobility challenged, I believe in wheelchairs, who are living in a space that does not meet their needs. We bought the larger piece of land, the 45 acres, about 2 years ago, knowing that it was more than we needed. And when we started talking with affordable housing regarding whether they could use a piece of it, we also said, well, anybody else that might need a piece and might be able to use some, there seems to be more than enough for several organizations. Just bring them along. So we purchased the land because it was in the right spot for a clinic. And because of the zoning being in the county, we knew that it would allow us to build a clinic with a parking lot. And we wanted some apartments above it as well. So it was hard to find a spot in town that would work. So we bought a place that is just over the county border, and it was bigger than we need. So as we were walking one day, Paul just said, can't you imagine affordable housing here? So we started the conversation with affordable housing, extended it to some other organizations, and we continue to be in conversations with other organizations as the vision of that community and what it could be grows and develops and changes. So the first people to actually get boots on the ground, a foundation in, and get a building up was CACL.
Okay, so you bought a huge chunk of land. I'm just going through the timeline because you were hoping to put a clinic just somewhere in town, but it was too big, and you're like, we could do so much more with this, and affordable housing was an idea, and then the CACL. And so now CACL, the building we see is the CACL group home coming into place, and that should be done maybe in like a year or something?
A few months, actually. I think they're hoping to be in the summer.
Amazing.
They will probably have another building behind it for some individuals who require, I think, less. They don't need live-in support, but they require some degree of staff support. So perhaps a 4-unit building going in behind that, but whatever they need it for.
They might also use it for staff as well, because currently I think they have staff coming from Port Hawkesbury.
Yeah, they're
because
staff.
It's too expensive in Antigonish for them.
Yeah, staff housing has been a crunch for them, but it partly depends on what happens. There has been a trend towards emptying some institutional settings and finding more supported living for people with various challenges in the community. So how they use that space is
up to them.
Something we're going to see.
And so what was the original clinic idea? What is this going to be? What are you building next?
Well, it sort of started when I was at a staff meeting at the hospital and realized that with the space shortage within the walls of the hospitals, within the walls of St. Martha's, it didn't make sense for all of the specialists to try to still stay at the hospital. The family doctors all rent space outside of the hospital, but the specialists have always been given space there. When I was in Yellowknife, my clinic was not physically attached to the hospital. And one day, Paul and I were talking, and I said, well, I'm tired of fighting for space for my department. Why don't I become a part of a solution? And in particular, we've always been understaffed for pediatrics, which is in the same part of the hospital as internal medicine. And I said, I would love to give my office to a pediatrician. Let's build something. So that was the first conversation. Then we started to look.
So
started to dream.
So who do you think is going to end up being there? What is the vision? It's your because you do internal medicine, and for those not in the know, which may include me, what specifically does an internist do?
Within the hospital, we look after the intensive care unit. We see some of the sicker patients. We don't do operations, and we don't do mental health, and we don't look after children. So the sicker people in the hospital, if you have a heart attack, you'll meet us. If you're on a ventilator, you'll meet us. If you're a surgical patient, but you have complications and your kidneys and liver aren't working so well, then in that situation, you would meet internal medicine. So in the hospital, we're looking after the sicker patients. In our clinics, we're seeing patients at the request of other physicians and nurse practitioners who are looking after them, who may want help managing heart disease, diabetes, someone who is just not doing well, losing weight, and we're not sure why. If you watch House is an internist.
I see. Yeah, dealing with the complicated cases. Yeah. Is that what you do? You solve?
And that's what we do. So,
right.
She doesn't tend to go rummaging in people's refrigerators to find out what's infecting them, but apart from that,
yeah. So right. So it's not a family doctor situation where I'm not just walking into this clinic and knocking on the door and be like, "Hey, can you help me?" It's all people who are being referred like you would a normal specialist referral.
It depends who chooses to work there. So my fellow internal medicine physicians may choose to come to what we're calling the Sugarloaf Medical Clinic. They may choose to stay at the hospital.
How many are there?
There are currently 5 members of my department. There will be 6 in the fall. That's how many positions we have. But I believe also that we are underserving our catchment area, and perhaps we do need to grow to have more than 6 internists.
So what is your catchment area?
It depends on who gets referred to us. I'm getting into my car tomorrow to go up to Inverness and Shetty Camp, which technically is not part of St. Martha's catchment area, but I have a relationship with those communities, so I go. In addition, our pediatrics department only has 3 offices. We have a 4th pediatrician. Where will they go? So there is definitely need within internal medicine at St. Martha and pediatrics for the space. The other thing is I would love to teach. And to teach, your resident needs an office. You can't have one office per physician. We don't have exam rooms. We just see patients in our offices. So we literally have one room per doctor. You can't teach a resident if you have that situation. So it gives us space to teach, space to grow, and hopefully some wiggle room. But ultimately, if internal medicine doesn't want to come, then it could be a family doctor, it could be a counselor, it could be a dietitian, a mental health worker, it could be a podiatrist. I don't know, just anyone who needs this space, who is interested in a beautiful space with a beautiful view 90 seconds from the hospital will be welcome to knock on the door.
And we heard the rumor that you also will have a music room there.
We would like to sell our house in town, spend more time at a farm that we have out in the country, and just live in an apartment above the clinic. So once we talked about a clinic level, an apartment level with an apartment for Paul and me after the kids finish high school, and 2 smaller apartments for visiting physicians. I said there's no room for the grand piano and performances. So the piano is relegated to the 3rd floor, which will be a large open space, hopefully for somewhat intimate performances.
Wow.
Chamber music, maybe an art gallery space. My secretary is a lovely painter, and I'd like to see her have a little more space for that. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but we'll have to see.
It sounds like fun. I want to go hang out there.
So, if you were to just sit back and explain to a newcomer here, how would you explain that space? You have a clinic, you have CSCL, you have affordable housing. What is your imagination of that space? How would you describe that?
I guess we're basically looking to have a community. So a lot of subdivisions, and I noticed this when I was visiting my parents in Ontario, you have these sort of cookie cutter, it's all townhouses, are all like there's no shops in there, there's no places to work, it just seems, I don't know, sterile in a way. So we'd just like to have some neighbors, and especially once we get a bit older, it'd be nice to have a little shop nearby or someone we can go and visit or someone who can come visit us.
I was telling a friend of mine that I'm trying to loneliness proof my retirement.
It does sound like this is just a project specifically so that you have the perfect place to retire to, and you're building the community around the grand piano, really.
Wow. And the image is still emerging, probably.
Yes, it is.
Oh, wow.
So the first time we drove into that property, I was just struck by the stillness and the quiet. Looking up Sugarloaf with just trees around, it is such a beautiful space. Literally 90 seconds from the hospital if you pop in your car. But I don't have a vision that we would be there by ourselves. I would love to, if we end up in the accessible apartment, there will be one apartment that is fully accessible. And if I'm in a wheelchair or bumbling around with my walker and I would like to hear children and see them in the playground, see people's laundry lines, make cookies for, and a new family maybe immigrating from another country. I'd like us to gather around shared spaces. We have a beautiful pizza oven on our patio here that we don't use enough. We would love to build another one there and know that anyone could use it. We'd like to see people whose lives intersect with ours. And this is when you look at the people who are served by Antigonish Affordable Housing, they're my people. They're immigrants. We're both immigrants. They're older. They have children. They may have other needs, and we want to be in a mixed community where our lives intersect with other people.
So tell us then about the plans for the housing. So there are three components to this land. It sounds like there's the clinic.
Three so far.
Three
There's
so far.
more.
There could be more. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but these are concrete. These aren't just pie in the sky things. These are actually happening. Through the news, the CBC had information about the housing with affordable housing. So tell us then that part. When is that happening, and what exactly are we dealing with in terms of housing?
So affordable housing, now that they have the land sort of is officially given to them in a legal sense, they now have, they can go to the various government departments and other organizations that can provide the funding to build this dream. We do have a condition that we don't want single family units. We want to see multifamily units, but that's really the only
And why is so?
condition.
We would like to ensure that this development has a measurable impact on the quality of life for a number of people here in Antigonish. We wanted to have an impact, and the county and town and province came together to fund the provision of sewage and water to the site, which is huge. We would like that investment to have a significant impact. It doesn't mean that people will be packed in as tightly as possible, but we do want there to be a measurable and significant impact.
Yeah, and the multifamily homes will create that community. Beautiful.
Okay, yeah, that makes so. The people that are living there, it sounds like from what you're saying, it's all sorts of people. You're talking about housing physicians potentially who are working at the hospital as well as families. So in terms of and older folks as well, retired folks. So it's a big all-encompassing demographic for people who need housing, whatever that might be.
So Antigonish Affordable Housing really is geared towards a specific part of the underhoused spectrum. You could say that there is underhousing at all levels of the spectrum.
Okay.
So they do not offer shelters. They don't have rent subsidies to the point where it's not simply geared towards your income. So you do actually have to be able to pay the rent, which is, I believe, usually between 60 and 70% of market value. So this is not the severely underhoused population, but you also can't have more than a certain income in the range of $65,000 for a single bedroom, and then more 70s for two and 80s for three. So even though the clinic would include the apartments above for temporary physician housing, People with higher incomes would not be catered to by Antigonish affordable housing. So they look after a specific sort of segment of that.
So there's sort of
that group.
a family or an individual cap. But
Yes.
okay. But still, what you're describing, that's a pretty
It's
big
high
cap.
enough
That's
that we're
most
often looking
people.
at professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah. We probably need another podcast with affordable housing at some point.
But absolutely, yeah.
Exactly.
But so those are the three things. Is there anything else in your sort of dream scenario where the land is being developed for your personal benefit or with your grand piano retirement situation? What other things would you love to see in this land?
Besides laundry lines, a childcare facility. We would love to see a daycare potentially offering overnight care for hospital employees, the children of hospital employees.
Yeah.
I have no idea how an emergency room nurse, especially if they're a single parent or they have a spouse who works away, how do they do night shifts when they have children? If they don't have family close by to look after, to provide in-home care, that's something where I think we, as a community, we have to look at how we provide for the people who ultimately provide for us.
So in some of the coverage of what you've been doing, the donation to CACL and the building, the affordable housing coming in, people are framing you as very generous people giving away lots of land. Everyone's curious to know your motivations, etc. And we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but how do you think of what it is that you're doing in terms of, you bought a large chunk of land and essentially donating big pieces of it for people to do, important, interesting
And
things.
I have that question as well.
Yeah. So
why are you doing it?
So Paul and I don't really think of this as a gift. We think of it as an invitation to share space that is already shared. We came here from the Northwest Territories, and I think my understanding of land has been certainly influenced quite strongly by the Indigenous peoples that I cared for in the North. Technically, according to Nova Scotia law, my understanding is that anyone can walk across land that you are not actively developing. So if we left 45 acres wild, anyone would be allowed to walk across it. They would be allowed to hunt during hunting season. And we would not be farming that land. We wouldn't be putting in a vineyard or a lawn or something like that. So really, this is no difference. It's just a matter of, instead of walking through the land, people can feel more welcome to stay for a while, including building homes and building their lives there as we are building ours. Every time an official meeting begins with a land acknowledgement, we are, in a sense, saying that land is a resource to be shared. I don't think that we can own the land simply because we put a building on it any more than we own the air because we breathe it, or own the sun because its heat lands on our shoulders. So to us, this is simply an acknowledgement. It is not a gift. It is an acknowledgement that this is a shared resource. Even more so when it is serviced in a way at public expense that will allow us to share the land and live well out on it.
Wow, inspiring.
So your future plans then are have the clinic up and running. When is that done?
It should. We're thinking probably 18 months. That would be my hope for that.
And the CACL is up soon functioning. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, they have a roof and siding is on the outside, so I imagine they're just working to get the inside done. And I think they also still have to hook up the water and sewer, but I don't see that taking a huge amount of time.
And then the first affordable housing buildings, when do you think they'll be available?
They're talking about 2027. So that, of course, is dependent on funding and a number of processes. But they've successfully done many projects before, and we have absolute confidence in that they'll provide a wonderful environment for people.
They will.
Cool.
For sure.
Is there anything that people haven't asked you about this project that you wish people knew? Like, no one ever mentions this, but they should know this. Anything along those lines?
You will not have to pay for parking at the clinic.
Okay. You should have led with that. I feel like that's the most exciting.
And
part.
I do acknowledge that parking at the hospital is really all geared towards providing comforts for patients, but you won't have to search for a toonie, and you won't be driving in circles looking for a parking space. We've designed it with ample parking. There should be 25 spaces.
Sweet. Anuj, you got any more?
No, I think I want to be a patient of internal medicine now. So,
I don't think that's a good plan for your future.
but what a nice, just first podcast. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for all the
so
answers.
welcome.
You've given us, everyone, the answers to the questions we had. So I very
And
much.
we'll probably come back in a couple of years and do this again.
Yeah, there could be like a
We'll be
Ferris
there.
wheel constructed up there,
We'll
or
be
some.
there.
Yeah.
We won't be in this house in a couple of years.
No, you'll be in your fancy. We'll meet you at your the grand piano
In the
space.
loft.
Yeah, we'll
In
see
the
you in the loft performance space. Anyway, thanks. Honestly, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
That's great. So this is our first episode of Let's Talk Antigonish, a pilot episode where we're testing the waters to see if people might be interested in a podcast like this.
Before we launch our podcast, we are hoping to get some feedback from you. Are you interested in a podcast like this? What kind of questions do you want us to ask and find answers to? How often do you think we should release episodes? How long should the episodes be?
You can provide feedback to us by going to facebook.com/Let's Talk Antigonish or email us at letstalkantigonish@gmail.com.
We hope to hear from you.